So the first thing the browser or the compiler behind the scenes does is that it will take that variable and it will obviously check inside this first condition in the first if clause. So in this first if clause, it's checking whether this variable contains a value of null or not. So it looks at the value and it sees that it has a value that is a string. So this if clause is skipped because this condition renders to be false. So we need to remember that whenever the condition renders to be true inside this, if the condition inside this clause is true, then only then this block will be executed and the rest of the blocks will be ignored by this compiler. Now the second thing in here is that because the first clause was false, or the first condition was false and the first clause was ignored, then it looked, or it is looking into this Elseif clause. So in this Elseif clause, it finds that there is a condition provided, and remember that whenever you provide an Elseif clause, you will obviously need to provide a corresponding condition to this. And only for the else clause, you do not need to provide any sort of condition whenever you try to include a default clause or an else clause. We'll be talking about default clause when we talk about the switch statements. Now the switch statement is a little different flavor of the conditional part, but let us first finish off with the else if clause. So in here, as the first if clause was false, then it's looking into the second one. In the second one, it sees that it has got a string value. So because this condition renders to be true, the reason behind its being true is that this variable has a value that is a string. So that's why this function will actually render something like you have if we literally try to read this. So we are checking that we are actually asking the value variable, the user input name variable is we are actually asking this variable that whether do you have a string value or not. So if the checking tells us, or this entire condition tells us yes, the value is string, then this part of the condition is true, then we will get, or we will actually the compiler will actually render out, or it will actually compile this part of code, or it will print out this message on the browser. That's why we are looking into a message that is being printed out due to the reason of being true inside this else if condition. Now, because the first one was false and the second one is true, the compiler will now actually ignore this third else clause, or the default clause. So we do not see anything being printed out by the compiler. But if there is a number like this, suppose we provide a number like this, and let's save this, and we should expect something to be like you have successfully typed your first name or something like that. But let's actually change this one. Change the message, because we are going to provide a numeric value or a number. So we cannot actually print out something like you have successfully typed in your first name. So we should type in something like you need to provide a non-numeric value or a string. So let's save this and let's get back to our browser. Let's bring it up and let's refresh the page. So here we see that the compiler is actually going through all the pathways. You can actually think of this as different roads towards reaching a single destination. So you can have several roads connecting to the city, you can have several roads connecting to your house. So if one of the road is blocked, you will look, suppose you have 3 roads that is connecting towards the city. So you choose the first road or the road number 1, and you see that the road is blocked due to some construction work or something like that. You avoid that road or you ignore that road. So likewise, our conditioning here, or our compiler, our compiler is actually ignoring this part because it sees that the condition is not true or the road is blocked. In our daily life, that's the way we can use conditioning. And then suppose you want to check what's going on in road 2 that is connected to the city. So you actually see that road 2 is also being under construction, or something happened, or there was an accident. That's why the road is blocked. So you also ignore road 2. Then you look at road 3, the last road, and you look at the road 3 is not blocked. It's absolutely clear, and you can take the path, or you can take that road. So that's why you take this road and you reach your destination. Likewise, our compiler behind the scene is actually checking all these conditions, and it sees that this value that is contained inside this variable is not null. That's why it is looking into this condition, and it's seeing that this value is not null. That's why it's ignoring this first clause. Then again, it's looking into this value, and it sees that this variable does not contain any sort of string. So that's why this else if condition is also false. And also, it's ignoring the second else if statement, or this second if statement, or whatever you call it. Then lastly, because this is the default one, if the previous clauses are false, then only then this will get printed, or this will get compiled. So that's why our compiler is now printing out the value that is included inside this else clause. So we can actually provide several different pathways, but remember that our computer is like a mega calculator. It needs to do calculation, and this if or else if or else clauses are like calculations. They need to do all sorts of calculation to make these decisions. So that's why the most expensive calculations inside computing is the conditional part. That's why you should use codes that are optimized, that uses you should only use conditionals when it's absolutely necessary. But yeah, of course, there is another form of conditional that's called switch case. That does not require so much computing power. But if these if statements or these if clauses provide you with different pathways, you can even provide several else if clauses if you want to, like this. Let me copy this. Let me paste this in here. So now let me change this into something like, let me actually erase this entire part, is numeric username, and let's change the message in here. Let's write something, congratulations. I guess that's the spelling. Congratulations. Your name has been accepted. Okay. So now let's look at the code. So we have provided another else if clause, or another condition to check for. Now in here, there are 3 checking that needs to be done. There are actually basically 3 checking that the compiler will do before reaching the final default else clause. So because the compiler needs to check all this, that's why it's the most expensive calculation inside computing. So, but it's actually also providing, or it's also making your application far more streamlined. Why? Because you're checking you are also making your application far more secure. The reason behind is that you're checking for different possibilities, because all users are not the same type of people. You need to actually look into their cases. Like some users might actually provide you with a value that is numeric, but you wanted a name. A name cannot be a number. But some users might not actually type in any sort of value. There might be some users who can type in a name that is a string, but at the end they might even include a number. So you need to check for all those possibilities. That's why if condition is the most essential calculation that you need to include inside your script. So the reason behind you need to provide these pathways is to make your application far more secure. The first one is that I'm checking whether maybe if I include this in a real life application, I'll need to check whether there is a value. If there is no value, like in this first condition, then I will print out this friendly message to the user. I will tell the user you need to retype your name. Then again, if the user only provides a string when I'm expecting a string and a number or something, maybe when you want your user to type in a password, suppose, in your password, you will always want your users to use numbers and letters included. So you don't want, that's something like alphanumeric. So you want your users to use a combination of numbers, symbols like question marks, then you also want your users to use alphabets. So in that case, you will check whether the user has provided something that is only letters, something that is only a string. So if a user has provided only a string, you will tell the user that please retype your password that has a combination of numbers, letters, and symbols. Then again, in this context, although I'm not checking for password, just for the example, in this context, I'm also checking for a numeric value. So if my user provides a numeric value when I'm expecting alphabets, only alphabets, because first names names can only be alphabets, they cannot be numbers. So I'll pass in, or I will print out a friendly message that the user will understand if something goes wrong or something doesn't go according to the rule. So if everything else is correct, or if everything else, I mean in my context, if the user has provided correct data, absolutely correct data, then I will print out the message that you have provided me with correct data and you are now ready to log in, something like that. In real life situation, that's how applications work. So in our perspective, we have provided 3 pathways or 3 conditions in our context. So the first one is that we're checking whether the value is null or not. If the value is null, then we print out a message. If the value is string, we print out a message. If the value is a numeric value, when we're expecting something to be a string, sorry, then we will ask the user that you need to type a string. You have to type a string, something like that. And then if the user has, if the value contained inside here is not null, or it's not a numeric value or something else, then we will print out this message. And that's what we are doing inside our browser. So I have provided 2 Elseif clauses in here, but if you need that, if it's a requirement for your application, you can actually provide several Elseif clauses. But remember that if clause will always be 1 and else clause will always be 1. You cannot provide several else clauses, or you cannot provide several if clauses.